First thing I want to do is go through some vocabulary to make sure that you have the basics of what we're working with in this unit. Some of these words, such as base, would mean something indifferent, for example, in a 3D figure, than it does in how we're using it. So I'm going to focus the vocabulary for what we're using. Base is what is being raised to an exponent. So when we're looking at an exponent, if I have something like 5 to the power of x, 5 is considered my base. If I had it in parentheses, such as 3x to the power of 4, this whole thing here is now my base. And it's important that we realize, for example, if I have negative x squared, only the x is my base. It's what's directly in front of that exponent, and whatever else is in front was going to be our next word. But if we wanted that negative included, we would have to use parentheses. Our next one is coefficient, and it is what's being multiplied by an exponent, or not an exponent, a variable. So if I have 5x, the 5 is my coefficient. If I just have x, my coefficient is 1. Or a negative x, coefficient is negative 1. Should have made a chart, then I didn't have to write coefficient as much. An exponent tells us how many times we multiply a base by itself. How many times? Oops. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more in the expanded form because they go together, because that's typically what we would do. So if we expanded form is writing out in detail, in this case, an exponent. An exponent problem, or exponential, that's what I want, exponential problem. So 5x squared is equal to 5 times x times x. We don't want to use an x as a times because otherwise that gets really confusing with our variables. If I have, so that this is expanded form. And if I had something like 2x squared y to the third, I'm really keeping in mind what the base is for each exponent. So the 2 is my coefficient, the x squared, so that's telling me my x is multiplied by itself 2 times. Y to the third says I now have 3 y's. And we're going to do more with them, so we're multiplying them out so we can actually see what's going on. The next word, exponential form, is writing it as a base raised to an exponent. So writing as a base raised to an exponent. And then it's in simplest form. And we will be looking at examples throughout the classwork. So just 5x to the fifth, that's considered exponential form. So we have, and one thing that we can look at is, what if I had 3x squared times x? So I could write it in expanded form. And then I would simplify it as 3x to the third. This becomes my simplified exponential form. So whenever I say exponential form, it's automatically assumed that we are simplifying. And our last word is to simplify. So we should only have each base listed in one location. in a term. And this is so much easier to describe in in an example. So even just like above with that 3x squared times x, that's not simplified because we have our x's listed in multiple locations within this same grouping. So I would want to write that as 3x to the third to simplify that. Such as if I had 5 times 2x squared, I'm going to simplify that to 10x squared. So I'm not going to have any multiplication problems that I still have to do, any division problems. Everything should be as simplified as we can. And throughout this unit, I'm going to be asking simplify, simplify, simplify. And so that way you have an idea of what we're looking at. So I'm going to make another video for the other part, but this would be all the vocabulary that you need. You can keep them on this sheet. You could print it out so you'd have them. You can write it in a notes notebook. Just make sure that you have that vocabulary.